they started this war. They were offered a state of their own. We were offered a country of our own.
By the UN.
They were the ones that said, no, let's start a war. They lost, play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
This is a Visegrad 24 series about the Israel-Hamas war.
We're back for another interview with Ella Kenan, also known Ella Travels on Twitter. A lot of our Twitter followers will have seen you. Welcome. How is the general mood in Israeli society? Do you think people feel that the war is progressing and that things are going maybe not according to plan, but that things are moving in the right direction?
Well, I think that there is a lot of sense of uncertainty at the moment. And I must say that the main goal wasn't, to conquer Gaza, but to take control in order to destroy Hamas infrastructure in Gaza. So October 7th won't happen again. So I think this is the main work the IDF does. I think that if that's the main goal, then it's being done. I think that there's a gap between where we want it to be by now and the reality of what is needed. So people thought that, we're almost 14 weeks after it started, that we'd be progressing much more maybe. But I think that also the IDF didn't know how much the infrastructure is so wide and
how many tunnels there are exactly.
Exactly. And also, lest we forget that there is also a civilian population that, although they were asked to leave in order to protect themselves, a lot of them couldn't leave because they are used as human shields for Hamas. So the IDF really, needs to work very, very thoroughly in order to avoid as much as civilian casualties as we can. And it's not simple when there's a terrorist organization.
And at the same time, it's also about keeping casualties as low as possible for the IDF itself, because technically they could just throw men in and, rush. And, if it was a matter of taking it very quickly, but without taking into consideration their own losses, then it could have been done very quickly.
Yeah, that's what I always say, that if Israel didn't consider human lives on both sides, then the war could have ended on October 8th.
Yeah. However, there is also a debate on whether once the territory in Gaza has been taken, whether the war will be expanded to also include Hezbollah in the north. Hezbollah has moved closer to the border since October 7th. Far beyond that line.
1701 UN resolution.
Which they should stay behind. Due to those attacks by Hezbollah in the north, tens of thousands of Israelis have been forced to leave their homes. Many of them are now staying here in the larger cities, in Tel Aviv and other places. And for them to be able to move back north, there needs to be some form of stabilization. And there are those who say that maybe there will be an operation needed against Hezbollah in the north as well. Do you believe that this is something that will happen?
I don't know what will be the military response. I just know one thing, that any country in the world that has a terror organization from the north of its border killing people with anti-missiles attack and missile launches towards civilian population areas wouldn't stay silent. The Middle East is not Europe or any other...
Far from.
Yes. So you need to show, unfortunately, I would prefer not to. I don't think that that's how you need to engage in life. But unfortunately, in this region, you need to show your strength, and we cannot not respond. I also want to put focus on the fact that this is yet another proof that it was never about Palestine, because, we disengaged from Gaza. And they used all their military, all their financial aid for missiles. And that's why we had the blockade. By the way, the blockade is also on the Egyptian side.
Yes.
That should be reminded. And people say, okay, it's because of the Palestinians and what you're doing. But then what's the reason for Hezbollah to attack? We don't have any territory in Lebanon. We're not occupying anything there. And there isn't, any argument. So it just comes to show you that these are proxies of bigger forces that are trying to hurt Israel. And Israel, like Ukraine, in a lot of senses, is just the first domino of Western civilization. And we are at the forefront of this battle. So it's not about Palestine. It's about something much bigger than that. And this is just a manifestation of this.
Would you say that that fault line, it runs all the way from Ukraine to Gaza? Are these two conflicts connected in that form that China, Russia, Iran, they have this little club of aggressive powers who want to change the power relationships in the world, and they want themselves to dominate?
It looks like that. It does look like that. I see that, you can see in Europe, and again, I'm not an expert on the Ukrainian-Russian war, but you can see that more countries are trying to join NATO, and you can see that even in Sweden, I read about it, and in Germany, that they're preparing for a potential war. And I've seen on your channel, like the aggressions on the Finnish-Russian border, that they're trying to do with the migrant, all kinds of provocations, on the borders. So, and we also know that in Gaza, they found North Korean and Russian weaponry. So it's all connected in a greater sense. And I think this is the story. I experienced that on a micro level because I'm an Israeli and we have our history here. I'm Jewish, of course. But when you look at a global scale, we're just there's a war between two X's. And we're on the Western side of it.
Yeah. Before October 7th, on your Twitter account and in general, you were focusing a lot on travel. This was your job. And here, in connection with that, you naturally come into contact with people from across the world, Americans, Canadians, various Europeans, and you must have had discussions with them back in the day when you introduce yourself and say that I'm from Israel. People have questions they don't know. Sometimes they might ask stupid questions. Why are you doing this to the Palestinians and so on? What do you feel are the main misconceptions among Westerners when it comes to Israel and the Palestinians?
I think that a lot of Westerners take a lot of social, cultural discussions within these Western countries and they project it onto Israel and the situation here. And I'll give you an example. There's a lot of post-colonialist discourse in European countries and in North America at the moment. And I understand that completely, but they think that we are yet another colonial project of these people who are white people coming from Europe, and they're colonializing this land, and this colonial project should stop. And I think that this is the greatest misconception, and it demonstrates a lot of ignorance. So I want to maybe set the record straight. Israelis are indigenous, Jews are indigenous to their land. We have a history here that could be, you can also see it with archaeology and historical record of over 3,300 years. And it's not a colonial project. And it's really funny to me to hear that we're white colonizers. Me, myself, I'm not a white person, but it doesn't matter. I don't like that racism. I'm not against white people. And it's funny that 80 years ago, Jews were burned and gassed in gas chambers in Europe because they weren't considered European and white. And a lot of the Israelis are either originated from here. There was a continuous settlement of Jews in this land for thousands of years, or they came from other Middle Eastern countries, Arab countries. So we're not white. Having said that, I don't like the discourse against, that if you're white, you're to blame.
Sure.
I don't like that. I don't judge people by their skin color or their ethnicity. And I think that there's reality and people need to move on. And maybe there's things to be done, but this is the greatest misconception.
Apart from these things that we hear about being the last colonial state that needs to be decolonized, you also hear often that it is an apartheid state. And at the same time, you have a lot of Muslims, a lot of Palestinians that are Israeli citizens. How do you square these things?
This is a great work by the Palestinians that they done, that they try to create a sense that this is an apartheid. So I have family, my uncle married a South African woman. So ever since I was like 2 or 3 years old, that was really the end of the apartheid regime. So I was visiting South Africa. My aunt was opposing apartheid. And I've been to South Africa so many times, more than 10 times. And this has nothing to do with the apartheid. First of all, 20% of our population is Arab, Muslim, or Christian. We have the only Christian population in the Middle East that is actually thriving and growing. And also we have, we had ministers in our government, we have political parties that are Palestinian, we have, or like Arab, Muslim Arab that call themselves, identify as Palestinians. We have Supreme Court judges, we see them in the army, we see them everywhere. What is, and maybe, we should talk about the elephant in the room. Israel and the Palestinians, we have a conflict on several areas in the West Bank, not A area, the more in the B and C areas, which is a small strip that we have conflict about. And we should resolve that. And I think we should resolve that in negotiations, okay? But never with terror. And I will never negotiate with somebody who thinks that I don't have a right to exist. So I think don't judge it as a colonial project, apartheid state. It's not that. In the end of the day, I can't go to the Palestinian authorities as a citizen. I'm not allowed to. But they come here every day and they work here. So that couldn't be apartheid. That couldn't be farther for the truth. The fact that they don't vote, they're not Israeli citizens, they have a right to vote in the Palestinian Authority, but the Palestinian Authority hasn't had elections for over 16 years. But that's their problem, that's not mine.
Yes, the last time they voted, it ended in a civil war in Gaza.
Exactly.
And Hamas throwing Fatah out.
Exactly, but that's not Israeli responsibility. Like, it's not apartheid, it's just their regime and the way they run their own business. And I don't think it's none of my business.
Speaking about these territories that you have conflicts about in the West Bank, those are small areas, but then you have people, we interviewed some of them, who simply say from the river to the sea, meaning all or nothing, and we want it all. What do you do with those people who have that position?
That's a genocidal sentence. Like, I think if you're calling from the river to the sea, that practically means the genocide of all Jews. They say, no, of course not. It's like we could all be one from the river to the sea. It will just be called Palestine. I think that's not realistic. There's a country here and it won't disappear. That won't happen.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that Israel as a Jewish state is non-negotiable. No. I think, there was an element in Israel of Jews who actually said, no, it doesn't need to be this way. But after October 7th, I think that has dropped to a couple of percent probably. It must be a very small minority position these days. Do you feel when you speak to friends and neighbors that the attitude from October 6th to October 8th changed diametrically? Yes,
but I also want to emphasize that I'm very proud of Israeli society on the Arab and the Jewish side. Almost 3 years ago, we had an operation in Gaza, and there was an inside. It was riots on the Arab side, a bit of a Jewish side, and it was really violent clashes. And this time, these people have relatives in Gaza, and also, there was this big massacre going on. They stayed silent, and they are really demonstrating great behavior. And also on the Jewish side, we see in Ireland an immigrant stabbing kids and another adult on the way out from school, and there were riots all around the country. We had a massacre that, the worst since the Holocaust, everybody, nobody is, no revenge, no riots in the streets. Everybody are helping each other. And it just comes to show how much this society is actually, it's not perfect, okay? It's far from perfect. We have, like any country and every society, we have our own problems. It's moral, and it's not as violent as I thought we would respond. So that's the main surprise I see, because people feel a lot of strong feelings, but everybody are very, taking it down a notch. I don't think it will be left versus right anymore. There will be a new construction. I just don't know which.
Returning to your travels, when traveling around the world and introducing yourself, saying, I am from Israel, what kind of reactions have you received, ones that you remember that were either very positive or very negative?
I've been to over 70 countries, some of which I've been over 20 times. So like I meet a lot of people. I always say I'm Israeli. So there's a funny thing that I was in Rome and I got into a taxi. And I entered the taxi and I was speaking in Hebrew on my phone. I finished the call and the Uber driver asked me, where are you from? I told him Israel. So he said, oh, we're neighbors. And I was like, oh, okay. I was keeping quiet. And then was like this, awkward silence. And then he said, I'm from Syria. I was like, okay. Like, why don't you kill all the Palestinians? I was like, oh, I was shocked that he said that. And I said, oh, we don't want to. It's not what we don't want to kill all the Palestinians. And that was very surprising. On the other hand, I did get in Australia and in New Zealand remarks of like, why go to the army and, practice this colonial project, firsthand? Like, why did you go to the army? Why did you do that service? It's very, don't do that. That's not immoral. And that was really funny out of people who are descendants of colonial projects. And, they're expecting you to leave. Why aren't you leaving?
If we look, time-wise, I mean, a lot of people arrived to Australia 150, 170, 200 years ago. And a lot of those Jews who arrived here with the onset of modern Zionism, we are also talking about the 19th century, early 19th, mid 19th, late 19th. So what is the difference really when we compare it to, do we demand from the Americans that all of them should leave and just give it over to the native population?
Of course not. And again, it's none of my business what they do in their own countries. Obviously, there are discussions about it and maybe there should be reparations. And there are a lot of injustices that happen in this world in the past 200 years. We had a Holocaust. We had to go through a Holocaust, obviously. But I don't like the judgment. I don't like that because it's just not the same. And also, I feel that Jews have been living here for so many years, and we're already here. What do you expect us? Where should I go? Where should I go back?
7th or 8th generation here.
Yes, exactly. On my maternal grandmother side, I'm at least 14 generations that we can count. Where should I go back?
Yeah. Also, when it comes to the Palestinians that live in these areas, we should remember there was never a Palestinian state.
Never. It's the name of a region.
You had the Ottoman Empire that was in charge of the region for hundreds and hundreds of years. Then you had the British Mandate. But during the Ottoman times, they were bringing in a lot of people to work in this part of the Ottoman Empire from other parts, from Syria, from
the 20th century. Yeah. So that's how it is in the world. Things change. A lot of Jews that come from Eastern Europe, they always say, yeah, I'm from Ukraine. Well, it used to be Poland when my great-great-grandmother was there, but now it's Ukraine, or the opposite, or it was Belarus. And it's like, this is how it is, and this is reality, and we need to move forward.
Yeah, you don't hear about people today. There are no political movements in Poland that would say it's time for us to change the border, to get our homes back, to move back, and so on, is just non-existent. So why is it that the Palestinians, why can't they move on?
Because there's an organizational structure that is aimed to keep things as they were in 1948. And I would call it UNRWA, basically. This is the only refugee agency that is designated for Palestinians only. You know, you have the HCR, which is for all refugees from all over the world. And then you have specifically UNRWA for Palestinians since 1948. And what it does is, you know, they have the interests of leaving things as they are. So people are being brought on the notion that it will take time, but they'll go back to their homes. And, you know, I had a great grandmother that was in Jerusalem in 1948 during the war. She got kicked out of her own home by Jordanians, and she was a refugee. But I'm not a refugee, and she moved on. You know, things are not fair. There are injustices. And they started this war. They were offered a state of their own. We were offered a country of our own.
By the UN.
By the UN. They were the ones that said, no, let's start a war. They lost, you know, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. And now let's move on and let's create a life in which we can live next to each other. We don't need to love each other. But once one side is progressing in life and they're making progress, you know, to have a good life. In Israel, you know, in comparison to the region and in a world and global scale, is a good country to live in. And one side, you know, even in Arabic, they call their resistance Harakat al-Mukawama Palestiniya. It's like the movement for against, you know, the Palestinian movement against Israel. So they're just against us. It's not like they're, you know, something to build of their own, you know. Lord Ernest Bowen, which was a British lord that was opposing Zionism, and he wasn't a great Zionist or Jewish, he didn't really like us. But he said something very interesting. He said, I think it was in 1937, but I'm not sure. It was in the 30s. And he said, as I see it, I see the problem. There are two groups. One group is the Jews. They want a home of their own. They want a state of their own for the Jews. And the other group are Arabs, and they just don't want the Jews to have a state of their own. And it's still the same almost 100 years later, and this is the whole story to me.
You could say that Golda Meir had something similar that she stated.
When they love their children more than they hate us. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think this is the essence. This is really the essence of this conflict. And I think that if we'll remove UNRWA from its educational institutions, and that's the reason that, you know, people that are maybe 7th or 8th or 9th generation in the West Bank or in Gaza, or they used to live there ever since, I don't know, they're calling themselves refugees. But how could that happen?
Also, speaking about these eternal refugees, those who live in Lebanon, in Syria, in Jordan, they are not given citizenship by those countries.
Of course not.
Why do you think that those countries are unwilling to give them citizenship, but also now to take in any refugees at all from Gaza?
Okay, so what they're saying, these countries, I just saw an interview with the Saudi Secretary of State. He said, you know, this is Palestinian land and Palestinians should stay in their own land and we don't need to take them because they need to be in their own land. What I think, and we can see from the past almost 6 years, is that maybe towards the West or towards Israel, the Arabs support the Palestinians. But within the Arabic dynamic, they don't like the Palestinians and they don't see them as of their own. A lot of them don't marry with them and they don't want to give them citizenships. So this is a situation in which Israel is really suffering because we did demonstrate that we fight for peace. You can see that we had a peace agreement with Egypt and we gave back territory. Again, with Jordan and we gave back territory. You could see that we have the Abraham Accords with Bahrain and the Emirates and Sudan and Morocco. So we know how to make peace with Muslim Arab countries. That's not our problem. Israel demonstrates that. The problem is, within, it's a Palestinian dynamic that is being, pushed further by Arabic dynamic within the region. So this is how I see it, and we are the ones to suffer. And I think that if I don't think it's Israel's job, change the education in their schools, not to hate Jews. You see all these books in school that they say that the best thing you can be in life is a martyr, a shaheed, and die by killing Jews. What kind of education is that? What kind of future? It just grows more generations of people who hate Jews and think that the only way in life is to kill and be in a conflict. I want something else. So I think the education needs to change. And if it will, then maybe in 1, 2, 3 generations, we could possibly live side by side. We don't need to be friends. I don't think we can be friends.
I think we have time for one final question, and maybe the most difficult one. What does it mean for you to be a Jew?
I love my culture, and I love that we take care of each other. And I love the fact that, in general, we invest a lot in community and in education. Again, in excellence, in not everyone, but in general. And we really take care of each other. And that is something I'm really proud of. It also comes with a lot of frustration. I feel misunderstood. And I feel that I'm being judged by standards that nobody is being judged on. And but I'm not a victim. This is something it's important to me not to be a victim, and I don't like victimhood. I take responsibility for the good and the bad, and for me, it's just who I am, and I'm proud of it, and I want to do good in the world, not just, be known for fighting.
A follow-up question. You mentioned the importance of community, and this is something that after arriving here we see a lot. But also another thing is the importance of family. Wherever we go, we always see parents with strollers. There are always kids around. For us from Europe, it's a huge contrast because you barely see kids anymore. You see a lot of pensioners, but kids, you really don't see them a lot. When we are here, it is obvious that here there's a lot of kids. Why do you think that these family values are so important here?
This is probably the essence of Jewish culture. And you can see that even the secular, liberal Jews, like my family, but it's not liberal like in the US. It's different, yeah.
In Tel Aviv, it's full of kids.
I'm a secular, liberal person. I come from a family of 4. My brothers and sisters, they all have 3 or 4 children. And it's just priorities in life, Not all it's about me and how much money am I going to have, like family, after all, this is, and if everybody are your enemies and nobody likes you, who are you left with? It's always the family. So family, I think, is the essence of Western culture. I think of all cultures, of all human beings. And I'm really proud to be in a country that has family values in that sense. And everybody has it a bit different. People that are more orthodox or conservative have it differently, but also the secular people are having a lot of kids. So I'm proud of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is, they say kids are the future, and they aren't wrong, that's for sure. Ella, many thanks for coming on.